Good morning, everybody. It is my privilege to welcome you to MedTech Innovation Expo. We got at a really important time for the sector, especially in the UK, as things probably look and feel different to a few years ago. And the first two sessions today covering the life sciences vision, where we've got Heather with us, who will take the mic in a minute, and the medical technology strategy nicely summarise the key role that the medtech industry is playing in the UK economy today, and the role it could have in the years to come. So for these reasons, I'm glad that we have put together a conference lined up, packed with policymakers and some of the leading players in medical device manufacturing, addressing everything from regulation to digital health to sustainability and a whole lot of other key issues in between. And I'm sure you'll agree, with the caliber of speakers and topics on show, you'd be hard pushed to get such a comprehensive agenda elsewhere, even if I am a little bit biased. So I'd like to thank everyone who is participating over the next 2 days for their time and effort, and thank them for putting up with my lack of patience over certain things. And I'd like to thank those from MediLink over there who have helped me source and secure some terrific speakers for this program. I hope you get just as much out of the experience as everyone else in attendance. The show floor looks great, and this year on our Connect Lounge we are delighted that one company in particular has decided to have their product launch here this afternoon. So with that and the program across our two stages, I hope you are truly spoiled for choice over the next 2 days. So you've heard enough from me. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, our keynote from the Office for Life Sciences. Heather Hobson is the Head of Regulation and Access and has played a key role in coordinating the delivery of Sir Patrick Vallance's regulatory review work on life sciences, is responsible for major programs on accelerated assessments of innovative medtech and the development of real-world evidence, and leads on cross-cutting engagement of regulatory matters with the sector. So please welcome Heather Hobson.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here today and to kick off today's proceedings. For me, that either means you'll all remember exactly what I've said, or you'll all have forgotten it by 4 o'clock. So I'm not sure which is best. So, we have a problem with the clicker. I'm just going to kick off with telling you a little bit about the Office for Life Sciences, because I imagine there's quite a few people here today who don't know who the Office for Life Sciences are. So we are OLS, the first of many acronyms I will try not to use today, and we're a joint unit between the Department of Health and Social Care and the new Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. For us, it's an incredibly exciting time to have a department solely focused on science, innovation and tech. And of course, we still work very closely with our colleagues in the Department for Business and Trade. And I believe you've got speakers from both the Department of Health and the Department for Business and Trade later on today, so you get the full works. So in OLS, we cover a very wide variety of policy areas with the aim to improve the health and wealth of the nation. That's a phrase you'll hear me say, hopefully not too many times today, but it's our core aim. So these policy areas include manufacturing, access to finance, investment and engagement, which means, essentially talking to industry, working out what can we do better, how can we help you engage system partners from the NHS to the MHRA to NICE. We also look at research infrastructure, so data and genomics, and then we look at innovation and growth, where we cover the full spectrum from product inception through to use in patients. So you can see a lovely picture of the life sciences vision there. In OLS, we are focused on delivering the life sciences vision. This is the government's 10-year strategy for the sector. Now, the vision was published in July 2021, so 2 years ago. We're 2 years in to a 10-year strategy, and we've made loads of progress. And the we that's made progress is government, the NHS, industry, and the third sector. Because the point of the vision is to work in collaboration and really partner to move forward the life sciences sector. So to deliver the vision, we're continuing to work with the stakeholders who helped us write it, And we're building on our existing strengths, learning from what we did well in COVID, and also looking to improve the UK's competitiveness. As we're continuing to kind of work with the sector, we're also striving to achieve better outcomes for patients, but also to solve the productivity issues created by ill health. So, taking mental ill health for an example, this costs the economy £118 billion a year, with a large amount due to lost productivity. So we being government, the sector, the NHS, and the regulatory system, need to work together to ensure that we've got new products coming through to really help us combat these big issues. And I'll talk more about that later. So, as I've said, since the publication of the vision, there's been a lot of progress, and we've also had the publication of the MedTech Strategy, which David will talk to, so I won't say very much on that at all. But delivering the vision remains key to delivering key government priorities, and not least the PM's pledge to cut NHS waiting lists. So, continuing to work in partnership, a word you'll hear me say a lot, we're really looking to deliver for patients and the sector. Hopefully we'll have a slide change. There we go, perfect. So, in the vision, there was 4 key themes, and I'm going to talk through each of these in turn and list out the progress that we've made to date, but also areas that we can go further. So first, science and research. We really want to build on the core world-class science and research capabilities that we have in the UK. We've got the NIHR, which is the National Institute for Health and Care Research. I will try and check myself on every acronym, who have a stand over here today, and they've got their health tech research centres. We've got UKRI and I think the 8 research councils, which I won't list. We've got our universities, and we've got, of course, industry. And within this, we've got a number of key focus areas. The first being clinical research, making the UK the best place to come and test and trial a new product. And to deliver on this, we have, in the last couple of years, produced the clinical research vision and the subsequent implementation plan. We're also looking at the reset of clinical trials post-COVID. And also, we've had a review this year by James O'Shaughnessy into the commercial environment for clinical trials, which was published just over a week ago. And the government response to that set out new funding to help accelerate clinical trial activity and create a set of accelerator networks to really create a joined-up approach to research across the country. We are working through what this should look like, and there'll be a full implementation plan in the summer. So my plea to you is, if you have thoughts on what this should look like and what you want it to deliver for you, tell us, and we can incorporate. The second area within science and research is genomics. We had the publication of the Genome UK strategy, I believe in December last year, and we're really keen to maximise our diagnostic strengths. The NHS Genomic Medicine Service carries out 680,000 tests in England every year, which is pretty impressive. And as of March, we'd sequenced 48,000 whole genome equivalents. Again, I think quite impressive. And also, we've recently announced an upgrade to the UK's biobank with a new facility in Manchester to create an archive for all of the data. Which leads me on nicely to data. I'm sure you've all heard of the NHS's Data for R&D programme. As long as I've been working in government, people have been talking about NHS data. And it was really interesting. I heard it described just the other day as the research environment is going to be like a museum. Industry researchers can go in, they can look at the data, they can take the information that they need, but most importantly, they can't leave with any of the information. So go in, view, leave, which I think is quite nice, but also should hopefully provide reassurance to patients that their data isn't being used inappropriately. And we're also looking at innovation programs, which I'll come back to later, to make clear the different data requirements for all the players in the system. And then we're also looking at registries. What can we learn from the National Joint Registry, and what other areas do we need registries in to really move things forward? I'll move now on to the second theme, NHS as an innovation partner. You'll also hopefully have seen around the floor that the NHS Innovation Service are also here, so a little shout out to them. Do go and have a conversation. As I set out at the start, the vision was created in partnership with the NHS and with the sector. And it's key for patients, but also for the sector, that the NHS is bought into delivering the vision and can be used to both adopt and drive innovation. So, of course, the NHS has the Innovation Service, and also it has the AAC, which is the Accelerated Access Collaborative, which has carried out many activities to boost innovation across the NHS. For MedTech specifically, there's also the MedTech funding mandate, but I'll leave that to David. And also, the Department of Health has also commissioned recently a review by Roland Sinker. Some of you may know him. He's the chief exec of the Cambridge University Hospitals. And this review is looking at how can the NHS partner better with the sector? What can we learn from things that have gone well, and can we create a blueprint for the NHS engaging with the sector moving forward? And then last but certainly not least, because it's OLS related, we in OLS have been working with partners across the system on health innovation programs. So we've been engaging with NICE, MHRA and the NHS for the creation of the recently announced, all but a week and a half ago, MedTech pathway, which will formally be launched in the summer, but this will include an innovative devices access pathway, which will take learnings from the ILAP, which is the Innovative Licensing and Access Pathway for Medicines. And this aims to create a framework for rapid regulatory approvals for highly innovative products that meet unmet NHS need. So I'm hoping that all of you are thrilled by this and are thinking, where can I find out more? Well, you can get in touch with MHRA and NICE to pre-register to receive further information about the programme, including details of when the expressions of interest phase will open. And further to the MedTech pathway, we're also looking at a programme around real-world evidence generation. What is the information that you, as the sector, need to get the relevant approvals via NICE, but also to have strong and broad uptake within the NHS? So hopefully we will be able to provide more detail on that over the coming months. I'm going to move to the third theme now, which is the business environment, and there are loads of sub-themes in here. I will try not to go on about regs for too much time, but I am the head of regulation and access, so of course I'm probably going to talk a lot about regs. And within regs, there are a few strands here. On the 27th of April, hopefully you all saw it, we laid legislation to extend the acceptance of the CE mark for products coming into the UK market until the end of June 2025. Hopefully, incredibly welcome news to you all. There's also just been the conclusion of the Chancellor-commissioned review into pro-innovative regulation for the life sciences sector, which was carried out by the government's chief scientific advisor. The work was started by Sir Patrick Vallance and taken on by the new GCSA, Dame Angela McLean. This review spanned 4 months and was supported by 2 industry sector champions, Professor Sir John Bell and Dr. Camilla Fleetcroft. I think a very worthy pair, both with exceeding expertise across pharmaceuticals and medical devices. They engaged broadly with industry and took on a lot of your concerns and shouted them very loudly to all those that would listen within government. And I think hopefully some of you have seen the review and the response. If not, it's on gov.uk, have a look. There were a number of key recommendations. There were recommendations on skills to ensure that the system has a sustainable pipeline of talent, not just within the regulator, but also within cost effectiveness assessments and also within procurement. There was also recommendations around fragmentation. How can we help the system to work better? What is getting in the way from stopping organisations who are dealing with the same company's application from working more closely? Then for kind of health specifically, there was recommendations on routes to market. They looked at the interim recommendations put forward by Sir Patrick at the budget, where the Chancellor announced our intention to move to international recognition for medicines and devices. But if we're doing international recognition, we need to make sure that the domestic regime really works and is world-class in its own right. The review also highlighted the need for innovative pathways, so the ILAP and IDAP that I've already referred to. And it also talked about needing transparency in timelines. We hear a lot from industry that sometimes parts of government aren't quick enough. Can we go a bit faster? Well, we want to show you that we're hitting the timelines that we've set ourselves. So following the review, the government has accepted all the recommendations in principle and we're moving towards implementation. So that is all quite exciting. Lots to do on regs for me over the summer. Who thought the summer would be quiet? And then further to this, there is also a programme of medical devices regulatory reform, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Building on the work that the MHRA have already done and with the publication of the government response to the consultation last summer, the Life Sciences Council, which is our steering group, for want of a better phrase, made up of our two Secretaries of State, our life sciences sector champions, the chief execs of all of the relevant organisations from the NHS to MHRA to NICE to the NHR, and industry representatives meet twice a year and talk about their key issues and opportunities for the sector. At the November Council, it was decided that we could probably go further with our post-Brexit opportunity on regulation. So there was an advisory group formed and they published 10 proposals in March this year on areas that we could potentially go further for medical devices reform. And these covered 3 areas on international recognition, innovative pathways, and system capacity. I think we're all seeing a theme here. It keeps coming through again and again. The things the sector wants, the things government want, the things the NHS want. So we're working to deliver those proposals. And since then, we've carried out further policy development with our partners in the MHRA, and excitingly, the MHRA have announced their intention to consult on international recognition by October this year. I'm not sure anyone's ever described a consultation as exciting, but let's just roll with it. They've also announced dedicated senior leadership for this medical devices regulatory reform, which again, incredibly exciting. So, moving off regs, as much as it saddens me to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about access to finance. We know for a lot of companies, growing and scaling can be difficult, and we want all companies in the UK to thrive. And that's why at budget there was an update to the R&D tax credits regime with an increased rate of relief for R&D intensive SMEs. There's also the LIFTS programme, which is the long-term investment fund for tech and science. I always want to say science and tech, but then the acronym wouldn't work, which is looking at how to ensure long-term funding. What can we do to incentivise longer-term investment into the long-term investment cycles of life sciences companies? And this is being driven by both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. Slightly shifting again, we've had great success with our manufacturing funds. First, we had the Medicines and Diagnostics Manufacturing Transformation Fund. I do wish we would make them shorter. And now we've got the Life Sciences Innovative Manufacturing Fund, where companies can apply to government for funding support to invest in their kind of upcoming manufacturing facilities. And we're also looking to support skills. We've got a new handbook coming out on apprenticeships and how to kind of support those. Now, I'm going to move to my fourth theme you'll all be thrilled to know. And I'm just, can we flip the slide on? Thanks. Covering the healthcare missions. Now, these are our flagship programs that we're delivering, again, in partnership with the NHS, with academia, and with industry to solve some of the key healthcare issues of our time. Now, for those of you who are either in the know or two have quickly Googled the Life Sciences Vision to skim through it, will have noticed that the Life Sciences Vision has 7 healthcare missions, and up here there is 8. We added the addiction healthcare mission late on in December 2021, following the publication of the drug strategy. And over the last 2 years, there has been significant work to define, shape, and scope these healthcare missions. And we've worked with a really, really wide range of stakeholders across the healthcare system, but also across industry, and we're going to continue to do that. Late last year, we launched 5 of the funded healthcare missions in mental health, cancer, dementia, addiction, and obesity. We've now got chairs and co-chairs in place for 4 of these missions who are really going to take forward driving and delivering these for industry and for patients. I think the key missions for the medtech sector, though, are probably mental health, addiction, and cancer. So in mental health, we've recently announced the phase 1 work to create a world-class network and clinical research ecosystem where industry can come to test and trial their products in real-world settings and accelerating products through to patients. We're really trying to pioneer a patient industry alliance with this so that the products that are coming through can be best informed by patients. What works for them? How do they want to take their drugs? What is the best way for them to utilize tech? What digital solutions actually work for them? So to help deliver this, we've announced 2 demonstrator sites in Liverpool and Birmingham, which should be having their own launch events very shortly, so keep an eye out for that. For addiction, we've got 2 open funding competitions, with the most recent Eye for Eye competition launching a week or so ago for treatment and recovery, looking for pharma, medtech, and digital tools that can be deployed at scale to really help those suffering with addictions. And then finally, for cancer, I won't labour this too much because I think it's mentioned a lot. We've got a really keen focus on early diagnosis. So if I can just flip to the last slide, thank you. So this is just kind of a few highlights that show that life sciences and science and tech more generally are front and centre of the government's agenda at the moment. And that is really exciting. And also a personal win. It's so great to have regs front and centre. This is something that really does need the entirety of the sector behind us to make sure that we're getting it right for you and for patients. So, in summary, the 10-year strategy, we're 2 years in, we've delivered a lot to date, but there is much more to do to improve the health and wealth of the nation. We want to do that in partnership, so this is an offer from me to you. Come and talk to us at any time. Get in touch, grab me for a tea at some point today, because if I have another coffee, it's too much caffeine. And yeah, happy to take any questions or discuss anything further. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Heather. So I have the mic to go around with any questions, so it's just a case of pop your hands up if you've got anything to ask Heather at all. We've got one gent here already.
Hiya. If you've got a new innovative technology, but it's not yet commercial, at what stage of development do you prefer the companies to come have a talk to you?
So in OLS, we would say anytime. If it's brand new and you want some advice on where to go, come and talk to us. Equally, MHRA are looking at setting up early engagement through the IDAP pathway, so that, you know, for anything that's really novel, you might be looking at it and thinking, well, I don't know what standard to use. Where do I go? What do I do? So we really want to make sure that through programs like IDAP, that we are creating an environment where you can just come and talk to us. And from OLS's perspective, anytime. We've got a full investment and engagement team who can help direct you to the right bits of the system as needed.
Okay, anybody else? She's got a lot of time, so feel free to pop your hand up.
They all want a coffee break. It's
Obviously
early trains, isn't it?
Obviously do. Well, unless there's anybody else, thanks very much, Heather, for a really engaging session. As Heather has said, she will be around to field any questions if you want to have a one-to-one with her at any stage. I think we've got David waiting in the background to be next up, so I'll introduce him next. But thank you very much, Heather.
Thanks very much.
Do you want to go on now, David? So our next speaker is the newly appointed MedTech Director from the Department of Health and Social Care with responsibility for setting the direction of future MedTech policy. So to tell us more about the recently published Medical Technology Strategy and more, please welcome David Lawson.
Thank you, and I think I've been in post about 7.5 months now, so new feels kind of out of date. So it feels like I'm wishing people Happy New Year still. But it's, I guess my previous background was in the NHS, so coming to the Department of Health feels like kind of moving to big school. So I'm still looking at the department, trying to work out how it operates. So I'm still in that kind of that honeymoon phase. I've titled my presentation Now or Never, and I think it echoes Heather's kind of comment at the end that right now feels like a huge opportunity for medical technology. So the sense is that we've got a huge kind of political kind of engagement around technology and the importance of technology and how medical technology can be a real enabler to help transform healthcare, help address some of the key kind of NHS priorities at the moment, whether that's around the elective backlog or so forth. So politically, now is a great time for medical technology because it's got the attention of not just the Secretary of State, but also you see from the announcements from the Chancellor as well, who was obviously previously a Secretary of State for Health. So politically, the environment is ideal to position the importance of medical technology. But also, you've also got other kind of major changes. So the work at the moment that MHRA are leading on to update the medical devices regulations, again, that's a huge opportunity to make sure that we create a future regulatory environment that can support industry, support medical technology, support innovation. And those changes are happening right now this year. So again, a huge opportunity there. And I guess from a kind of commercial procurement perspective, we've also got changes with NHS supply chain, where they've been bringing together the category towers into a single function, so that helps support greater alignment and consistency of approach. You've got the central commercial function in NHS England under Jackie Rock, so that gives again an opportunity to try and fix some of the challenges that we hear from industry about, how to sell into the NHS. So lots of things happening right now. So if we can't kind of move forward with med technology this year, it's kind of, I'm not sure when we can. We've got the political environment, we've got opportunity to shape the medical devices regulations. We've got changes on the commercial side with NHS supply chain and NHS England. So now I think this year is a huge year. And I guess the other thing we have is we've got the first medical technology strategy, which was published in February. So the strategy kind of sets out a vision of right product, right price, right place. And in terms of right product, this kind of speaks to one of the key challenges we have with MedTech, where we have such an array of choice. So if you look at medicines, we have about 15,000 medicines in use in the NHS. Whereas for MedTech, we have over 500,000 medical devices in regular use. So how as a system do we decide what are the most effective technologies to use when we've got such an array of choice. So we need to have an approach to enable us to make that selection process so that we're able to adopt at scale the most effective technologies. Right price isn't about the lowest unit cost, and I was previously in a commercial procurement role, and I was often accused of having a pound sign above my head at all times and focused on lowest price. So I think right price in this context is recognizing the role of MedTech to influence and change patient pathways, so understanding the full value of MedTech and seeing MedTech not as a cost but as an investment, and an investment as an enabler to transform and change patient pathways. And right place is partly around availability in terms of this challenge around shortages and resilience, but also in terms of access and equal access. And again, medical technology and new innovation has a huge potential to improve equal access across the health system. To achieve this vision, the strategy sets out 4 priorities. So I'll probably talk most about priority 2 in terms of innovation, but just to kind of go through the other priorities. So priority 1 is around resilience. And I think if a strategy was published before Brexit, before COVID, resilience might not have featured, but certainly since Brexit and certainly from COVID, the vulnerability of our supply chains is becoming an ongoing issue. And even post-COVID, we're still seeing a challenge around shortages, which impacts in terms of patient care, patient safety. So ensuring a resilient supply chain is a key part and a key component of the MedTech strategy. Priority 2 is around innovation, and this politically is probably the number 1 priority. The sense is that we don't have a challenge with innovation in itself. What we have is a challenge around adoption and the ability to adopt at scale. People talk about the number of pilots in the NHS, and I think there's a comment made about there's more pilots in the NHS than British Airways. We're very good at piloting in isolation, and there's lots of examples of technology that's been adopted in one location and delivered great results, but hasn't been able to scale up. So our challenge is, how do we select the technology that's most effective and then have a process that is able to scale up that innovation across the system. Priority 3 is around data, enabling infrastructure. So if you think of resilience, if you look at medicines as a comparator, at a national level, we have real-time visibility of where every medicine is across the country and every NHS trust by having interfaces with Ascribe and JAC. For MedTech, we don't have that visibility. So when there's a product shortage, at a national level, we don't know where that product is across the country. We have to go through a process every time. So there's basic issues around data, lack of visibility, that at the moment makes it harder for us to manage things such as resilience. But also in terms of basic things such as a national product register, a single source of truth. We don't have that either for medical technology. So that creates a barrier in terms of visibility about what products are actually in use regularly across the NHS. And I guess the 4th area is a recognition that across MedTech, which covers a huge array, so from diagnostics into treatment, into aftercare, into prevention, there are specific markets within medical technology that deserve greater attention. So the strategy in particular talks around the diagnostics program, which represents a huge array of different initiatives, and also around Part 9 tariffs. So we spend about £1 billion in primary care on medical technology, and we're currently doing a review of that market. So the strategy was published in February. We now have an implementation plan. We're due to publish that plan hopefully next month. And I guess the key aspect of that plan is it's very much a multi-agency approach. So I won't go through each of these initiatives in detail because of time, but I will speak to some of them. But I guess a key message is that the the approach we're taking is to make sure that we've got an inclusive approach across the health system. So the expectation is that some of these initiatives are led by MHRA, some by NICE, some by NHS England, some by NHS Supply Chain, as well as the Department of Health and Social Care. We have a quarterly program board now, which involves the chief execs of NICE and MHRA, NHS Supply Chain, Jackie Rock from NHS England, Vin Diwakar from NHS England as well. So the idea is to make sure that we're joined up, and one of the challenges, I guess, with the health system is that we need to make sure that all the different agencies and alongside OLS that we're working in a coordinated way and we don't duplicate. So a key aspect of this approach is to make sure that we're joined up. Although the strategy was only published a few months ago, we are making good progress. So if I maybe just touch on some of the initiatives. So on priority 4 in terms of Part 9 tariff, we're due to publish a consultation next month to make recommendations to make changes to how the Part 9 tariff works. So we're on track in terms of that work. In terms of priority 3, NHS England have already written out to NHS Trusts last month to launch the Outcome Registries Programme, where it will be mandated for all NHS Trusts to send data on implants used in surgery to build a national outcome registry, and that will help going forward to provide base data. So that program is already well established. We're working with MHRA to finalise the business case to create a national PIM, to create that single source of truth. So we're expecting that work to progress later this year. You'll see the number of initiatives on innovation is probably is the largest number. So there's particular areas that have already been announced. So the Life Science Council a couple of weeks ago announced the Innovation Devices Access Programme, IDAP. So that's now will be taken forward in partnership with OLS, with MHRA and NICE to provide a pathway for novel technology. Multi-tech evaluation is where we're working with NICE to position NICE front and center in terms of how categories are managed going forward. So at the moment it takes NICE about 16 to 17 months to do an assessment of a technology. We're in discussion with NICE to have a program where they do rapid assessment of a class of technology in a 6 to 7 month time window. But to have the outcome of that NICE assessment to have a consequence, so to have that assessment feed directly into the category strategies of NHS Supply Chain, for example. One of the frustrations we get from industry is that even if a product is subject to a NICE assessment, it doesn't necessarily mean anything as a result. And there's lots of examples of innovations that have had a NICE assessment, but then nothing has happened in terms of ongoing adoption. So our aim is to try and position NICE in an aligned process for existing technology. We then have the challenge around new innovation. So we have the MedTech funding mandates. So the MedTech funding mandates has helped, I think, 12 technologies over the last few years to be adopted at scale. So we know as a process it can work for those technologies, but one of the limitations of that system is that its entry criteria is quite tight. So technologies are only assessed if they have a NICE guidance. To be selected, they have to demonstrate a payback within 3 years. They're focused on cost savings as opposed to outcomes. So what we're aiming to do is working with NHS England is to look at the MedTech funding mandate and look at opportunities to reform how the entry criteria operates to provide a wider kind of pipeline and use that mechanism to try and enable adoption at scale. And the other benefit of using the MedTech funding mandate is it also takes away that challenge of, from an industry perspective, having to do multiple pilots across the country to get your technology adopted. If it's subject to a rapid NICE assessment, if it's on a MedTech funding mandate in the future, then the aim would be that it should be adopted at scale without the need for additional pilots. 。 I've got there listed MedTech adoption programs. So this reflects one of the kind of political priorities where there's a sense about, are there technologies available right now, already in use, that could be adopted at scale quickly? So we're currently working with NHS England to identify technology classes to do that, to provide new funding, to enable an accelerated adoption of key technologies, particularly focused on winter, but then to use that program to provide the catalyst to then look at ongoing changes to the MedTech funding mandate. So some of these initiatives are kind of linked together. But I guess the key message for me is that fixing the problem of adoption is a key priority, and through these initiatives, the aim is to try and do that. And then finally, in terms of resilience, we've got a program called Design for Life, which is around encouraging a move towards more of a circular economy. So where appropriate, reducing the use of single use and trying to move where appropriate for reusable products. So we had a launch event a couple of months ago. We're now setting up a series of engagement with industry over the coming months to work out where we focus. We're working quite closely with Exeter University and their sustainability team to support that program. UK MedTech capability and capacity. This is very much reflecting the work that's been led by Jackie Rock in NHS England to try and engage closely with particularly SMEs to understand their challenges and to make sure that from a procurement perspective we're making things a bit more easy and more logical for industry. One of the key messages that's come back to me is around the challenge of consistency. So whether that's around DTAC in terms of digital, whether it's around how social value, net zero, value-based procurement is actually applied in practice at both a national and local level. There is a lack of consistency of approach, and so again, we need to tackle that to avoid kind of unnecessary burdens to industry. So I won't go on, but I guess the key message is we do from the strategy, we're now moving to implementation. We have a set of initiatives that we're moving forward with. The aim is very much to have an engaged process, so across the health system. We're also heavily engaged with industry, and I'm always open to engage and meet with suppliers individually or through trade associations. I'm also engaging with patient groups as well to make sure that the patient voice is kind of brought into the center of some of these initiatives going forward. So just to sum up, I think now or never, MedTech is recognized as important politically, and therefore this year in particular is a huge opportunity for us to kind of fix some of the frustrations that we've seen with particularly around adoption. We have a vision of right products, right price, right place. This is addressing that challenge of the huge array of technology. We need to make sure we have systems and processes in place that ensures that we can select the most effective technology and then get it adopted at pace. So current immediate focus on adoption, and also around procurement, this challenge of consistency. So I'll stop there, but happy to take questions.
Thanks, David. So I've got the mic again, so anybody who has a question, we've got one here. Okay.
Thank you. Are we doing enough to break down barriers to external innovation coming across from other countries like Europe, for example, and companies' perception of the barriers to start up in the UK? Or are we trying to do it all ourselves?
No, I mean, I think that's a good point, and I think it's interesting that we're not unique, are we, in terms of the challenges we have in healthcare in the UK. And when I speak to other countries, they have exactly the same challenges around innovation. I think there is a challenge that we need to address in terms of the perception of our regulatory regime and the need to communicate reassurance, I guess, that we have a roadmap, that there is firm dates that we're going to achieve, to give industry certainty. feedback I've got from industry is that traditionally Europe has been seen as the go-to place for new innovation, first to market. The adoption of MDR has been challenging for industry, and therefore a lot of industry are now saying to me that in fact America and actually going through FDA is now more attractive to first to market because of the challenges in Europe. Therefore in the UK we have a potential opportunity. If we can ensure that our regulatory framework is attractive and open to industry, but also solve the adoption challenge and give confidence that we have a joined up approach to enable a pathway for adoption, that provides quite an opportunity, almost like a sweet spot, where we can have the benefit of a clear and open regulatory framework, but also have confidence that for effective innovations that we've got an adoption pathway. So yeah, I think we need to do more to give assurance, because there is a risk that the UK is seen as post-Brexit too difficult, too complicated. So we have to be quite proactive in our communication around the new regulatory framework that's coming. But also, if we can fix the adoption challenge as well, that in itself will provide a positive signal, I think.
That's great. Thank you.
Just got one over here first. If you just pass this microphone down to the lady, please.
Hi. The FDA has a medical device database. Is that the product information management database that you mentioned that the MHRA are working on now? Or is there other organisations that are planning on creating something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, coming from a procurement background, there's been discussion around the National Product Register for probably 15 years. And in fact, there was a Department of Health strategy from 2013 that recommended a national PIM. So there's been lots of discussion about a national PIM, and talk about different organisations would be best placed to host a PIM. I think our conclusion was that MHRA are probably best positioned to host that PIM, A, because they've got an existing product register that they need to update anyway for the new regime, but also because of the ability for them as the regulator to mandate data coming in. So the intention is not to duplicate and to build off what's already in place with MHRA, but to make sure that it delivers what we need as a system, but also delivers benefit to industry in terms of, clean data should mean transactional efficiency for industry, which is something that industry has been calling for a number of years.
Thank you. Who's next? I'll go to Graham because it's easiest for me to hand it to you.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, David, for the really interesting presentation. I completely agree that adoption is absolutely critical. And I'm interested to touch on consistency, because we've discussed this before. And if you think in the region that our company's based, 99.6% of life science companies are SMEs. And yet, I've worked for large MedTech, and you can drop millions over years because you know that long term you'll get that gain. There's so much innovation from the SME sector, but you do not have the funding and the cash to sustain consistent and focused losses when you're trying to get technology adopted. Could you maybe touch on some of the aspects of consistency that could actually, take life and really happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess part of the message is that I think the problem is recognised now, and you've been involved in engagement and continue to be involved in engagement, particularly with Jackie Rock's team. So I think one of the positives is that it's recognised there's an issue that needs to be addressed, because I think part of the barrier in the past is that people haven't necessarily accepted that there's been an issue. So I think we've overcome the first hurdle of recognising that it's a problem that needs to be fixed. I think at a practical level, and particularly in your market in terms of medical consumables, the fact that NHS supply chain are now have brought together those category towers takes away the risk of different category towers having a very different approach. So I think at a practical level that gives an opportunity for consistency. I think the other part is, if I'm honest, in terms of education, And I hesitate because I'm from a procurement background, so I see it in myself that where there's a tendency not to be thinking about the importance of SMEs or the importance of sustaining a market. And there's lots of examples in the past of procurement decisions being undertaken that have effectively damaged the market and reduced competition long term, which then in itself affects innovation. I mean, if Jackie Rock was here, and she would talk about the importance of category strategies and consistent category strategies. And with a category strategy, you've got to think about sustaining the market. So I guess to answer the question, I think the problem's been recognised, which is a good thing. It's now identifying the practical steps. But the fact that you've got the changes, the structural changes within NHS supply chain, that helps. You've got leadership within NHS England at a commercial level, which is recognising this as a challenge and wanting to do things to also influence how procurement is done at a trust level. That's also the way I think that it'll be addressed.
Okay, yourself here?
Thank you, David. I think it's good to see you highlight inconsistencies as the next priority for you. I work in digital therapeutics, and there's a real confusion in terms of we're regulated as a medical device. We're prescribed for therapy as a treatment device, but procured as IT, right? And so there's real confusion in terms of, this is the right at the center, and I think we're at the cutting edge, exactly what you're talking about, using artificial intelligence and everything in terms of what you're putting up there. So what's your view on procurement, and where do I go? Now I'm sort of got the UK CA mark, but where do I go next in terms of procurement?
I mean, the whole digital landscape's interesting because 10, 15 years ago it didn't exist. So there's almost, we are trying to play catch up. I think in terms of when suppliers come to me and say, where do I go to in terms of help and guidance, one of the things I say is to engage with the AHSN network, because they're close to the system. So at a regional level, they're quite close to the priorities of individual ICBs and trusts. So if you're not engaged with Academic Health Science Network, I would encourage that as a way of understanding what the needs are and the priorities. I think from a procurement perspective, I guess I might be quite controversial. I don't necessarily see procurement in itself as a difficult hurdle. And what I mean by that is that it's quite easy for industry to onboard itself onto various national digital frameworks, and there's frameworks called dynamic purchasing systems. So even if you're not listed at the beginning, you can list throughout the life of the framework. The challenge is reimbursement. And I speak to a lot of industry who say, we're on the national framework, we've got really good engagement from a hospital or an ICB, they really want to embrace and adopt our technology, but we haven't got any funding. How do we move forward? And I think it goes back to my point about adoption, and within that challenge, it's about reimbursement and having a joined-up approach. If you look at medicines, that innovation pipeline is 9 months. 3 months with MHRA to be licensed, 3 months with NHS England to set the price, 3 months with NICE to do a technology assessment. If it's positive, it's a statutory obligation to adopt it. For MedTech, it's not 9 months. And it's not joined up. So between MHRA, NICE, NHS England, it's not aligned. And that's what we've got to solve, I guess, in terms of the challenge, is to have a more joined up approach between those 3 elements, but particularly around reimbursement. I'm not sure I've answered your question though, because you asked, where do I go? I mean, I think as Heather said, that, speak to OLS, where from a department, we're quite open. I think we have an open door approach. There's NHS England have an innovation service. They have a joint digital team, an AI team with the department. But I recognise the challenge, and sometimes people say there's lots of front doors into the system, but unfortunately there's no door handle at the front. You have to wait for But I think if we can provide if we can fix some of the processes, like if we can update the MedTech funding mandate, we've got IDAP coming through, if we can provide those channels that are joined up, then I think hopefully that'll make things easier going forward.
David, hi, it's Colette Hamilton here. I happen to be, can you hear me okay? I'm a MedTech reimbursement specialist. And what I wanted to ask you, thanks for your talk by the way, is, you know, one of the ways that technologies can be more effective the secret is in the patient selection, isn't it? And having better insights on which patients will respond to the therapies. So how do you square off the business of selecting an effective technology with the drive for more personalised medicine? Because they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but if you look at one in a silo, you're at danger of compromising personalised medicine potentially, and it could be counterproductive. So I wanted to ask you about that.
The questions are getting more difficult now. It must be a coffee break coming up soon. I mean, it's interesting. When you look at the moment, if you look at reimbursement for MedTech and how the decision's made, it's very much focused on cost saving. And you see that with how MedTech funding mandate operates, but also you see it how in the way that NICE are asked to do an assessment. And I was speaking to someone from NICE last week, and they said that they've just given a no to a technology that they've been asked to assess. And the reason they gave a no is, from their perspective, they were asked the wrong question. So from a NICE perspective, what they're saying to the system is, you need to think about the question you're asking. You need to think about more an outcome-based approach as opposed to, which is more like medicines, whereas at the moment MedTech is focused on cost savings. And if you want to realize the full potential of MedTech, it has to be outcome-based approach. Yeah, value-based. I'm not sure I've answered your question. Your question was too difficult for me to answer properly, so but I think that's I think it's important how we calibrate the question going forward, and that has to change.
I'm going to get a couple more in, David, and then I'll let you sit down. So we've got one gentleman here.
Hello, my name is Dr. Phil Coles. I'm a consultant anaesthetist in South Wales. Thanks, David, for your presentation. I work with Joy here. We've come from Wales with the SBRI Centre of Excellence. And within that environment, we similarly have very similar challenges in Wales, particularly around procurement. My particular interest is in artificial intelligence, where we, through a challenge-led innovation with a group of clinicians, managed to deploy AI in pathology diagnostics with success in 6 out of our 7 health boards. And my feeling is a huge part of the adoption is around that clinical engagement, leadership, and as Cotta says, that guiding coalition. I'm curious to know exactly what your plans from a strategic perspective are around artificial intelligence emergence, which is a rapidly evolving field, and how we test and ensure that's safe for patient use.
Thank you. And I'm conscious that Wales is also seen as probably one of the leaders around procurement, value-based procurement and innovation. So I should be asking you the question to give me the answer first. I mean, it's certainly true that AI is seen as a key priority, and there's been various funding announcements already, and there's probably more to come, that more funding is going to be put into AI. Something that people talk to me about is they term it professional resistance to change, where there's AI technology out there, but there's a resistance from the clinical body to trust it. So I think part of the answer is to position NICE potentially to provide that assurance to the clinical body that it's safe, it's effective, it's cost effective. So I think part of the answer to try and encourage adoption of AI and to overcome that potential barrier of adoption in terms of that resistance to change is thinking about positioning NICE to do more assessments on AI to give that reassurance back to clinicians. But that on its own isn't going to solve the whole problem. So I think a key problem is reimbursement and getting that understood and agreed. You've also got the change management challenges, which alongside that resistance to change, AI has the potential ability to radically change and improve productivity and pathways, but you need the change management support around that, and that's often not understood.
Okay, are there any more for any more? David, you might get to sit down now, but if you have got any further questions for David, I'm sure he'll be bobbing around the show. I'm sure you can catch him privately, but everybody please thank David for his presentation.